has underpinned crude prices and changed the balance of power in the Middle East. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Now on Bloomberg Markets, Unis in Focus with Joe Mysak.
Focus on Unis brought to you by Build America Mutual. Will get you paid. Will you get paid if an earthquake puts your municipal bond investment on shaky ground? Yes, AA guaranteed BAM municipal bond insurance protects against everything that causes a default. Visit buildamerica.com. When we look at any kind of bond, particularly safer bond today, yields lower as people search for any kind of place to park their cash where they can get their capital back. That is the mood today. It is not a search for yield. It is a search for capital preservation. Joining us now is somebody who has a lot of capital preservation. Joe Mysak, municipal bond editor for Bloomberg Briefs, joining us here in our Interactive Brokers studios. Joe, let's just start with the massive move that we've seen in bond yields today. I mean, this is a sort of historic day, frankly, a historic week in credit markets, debt markets broadly, as people expect the lower bound to go to zero in the United States and beyond. What's that doing in Muni world?
Well, you know, munis always lag treasuries. So, for example, in a 10-year bond treasury, I think it's, 0.75, something like that, 0.71. And the 10-year municipal bond is yielding about 0.91. So this week we had the very interesting sight of the ratio going from in the 80s, 90s to today over 107%.
So directly in the municipal bond market, what are the areas? I understand there's some municipal bonds that are backed by airlines, and we've seen airlines just get crushed during this coronavirus scare. So what's happened to those bonds? Oh man,
they took a hit. So people want a little more yield on the airline-backed bonds.
So these are bonds like a terminal or something like that?
Yes, what they do is airlines sell municipal bonds when they want to build a new terminal or sometimes even new gates. And so, they're behind the bond. They stand behind that. But that means that the airline is what you're buying. You're not buying the airport. So you think you're buying, Logan Airport, and no, you're buying, United Air or whatever. And they took a hit. And there are maybe 4 or 5 segments in the municipal market that are probably going to be experiencing a little heavy weather down the line here. The airport, the airline business, the travel business does not come back quickly. The convention business, the conference business, that does not come back swiftly once it goes away. The whole work at home syndrome, if you will, that has an impact on urban economies that rely on foot traffic. So, you have to keep thinking of, what is the cascade we're looking at here? And you talk about sports arenas or...
the Garden was packed last night for the Rangers.
Well, so far.
Yeah, so far there hasn't been the same kind of disruption. I am curious, though, on a broad level, a lot of people are concerned about the plumbing of markets as more stress comes into play. We were speaking with Mike Collins of PGIM Fixed Income earlier today, and he was saying he is not seeing the sort of mass fire sales that would indicate a true crisis. I'm wondering, when you talk about the municipal bond market, it is made up of thousands of individual QSIPs, small amounts issued, and individual investors that typically buy them. How concerned are people about just generally liquidity, either on the way up or on the way down when we're talking about prices?
Right now, not very, although this week, for the first time in, I think, 60 weeks, we had outflows from municipal bond mutual funds of $250 million, which is a small number. And every once in a while, you'll hear somebody say, well, when people rush for the gates, liquidity dries up. So are people, wildly concerned about it? No, they're not. There's no mass dumping of municipal bonds right now. So, it's one of those wait and see things.
What's the new issue activity been over the last couple of weeks as we've experienced this, incredible volatility?
We've had, we have something called 30-day visible supply. And 30-day visible supply, so far it's averaged this year about a little over 13 billion. Today, I looked at it again, and it's almost 15 billion. So that has hung right in there. And issuance has not been depressed yet, but we are at the beginning of this crisis. Yeah. Remember, last week was the first week we had 4,000 points on the Dow. Right? Everyone all of a sudden is paying attention to it. We're right at the beginning.
Joe, a listener is messaging in and wants to ask you something real quick here. Earlier this week, it was reported on Bloomberg that there was dismal retail interest in this week's New York City Go, the general obligation offering. Can you have a sense of what that indicates? That's sort of unusual, especially given the backdrop that we've seen for yields.
That was very interesting, a good deal. It had retail, individual investor participation of about 9%, and usually New York City has about 27%, sometimes even higher than that, participation by retail in a deal. So a big drop-off there, and our sources were telling us, hey, at these nosebleed levels, when you're talking about less than 1 point for the 10-year bond, yep. People are starting to shy away from that.
Joe, thanks so much. We're out of time, believe it or not. Joe Misek, editorial, Bloomberg, a brief for Bloomberg News, joining us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. Just quick check of the tape. S&P down 75 points. That's 2.5%. The Dow down 570. That's about 2.2%. NASDAQ right here down 2.5%. That's 217 points right there. Gold rolling. Oil rolling off over 8%. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Concerted efforts from central banks and governments to soften the blow from the coronavirus drove gains for stocks earlier in the week. Now investors are back to taking risk off the table. We're seeing stocks dropping this session. Costco posted blowout February sales as customers began to stockpile goods in response to the coronavirus. U.S. comp sales increased 11.6% last month. Starbucks is moving aggressively to keep the coronavirus out of its cafes. Workers in its 14,000 U.S. locations are being told to wipe down busy areas of the store as often as every 8 minutes, and it's adding workers to help with the extra cleaning chores. And in other news, Gap looked within to find a new CEO. It's Sonia Singhal, who runs the company's Old Navy chain since 2016. Gap is trying to reverse falling foot traffic and sales while it pivots to a new strategy. Singhal oversaw sustained growth at Old Navy, but that expansion has evaporated in recent quarters. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Delayed at the dentist and now you're late for school pickup. You need a free now. Need to take the dog to the vet before lunch. Should have gotten a free now. Trying to get 4 kids and their baggage to the airport. Free now. Sometimes you can't get from A to B fast enough. Download the Free Now app today for quick pickups and reliable drivers, no matter the situation. Less hassle, more hustle with Free Now.
Matt Letizia, what did you make of that performance today?
Well, it really was a game of two halves, to be honest, Jeff. Leicester came out in the first half really...
Letiz?
What's up, Jeff?
Run for it!
What the...
Move over, football. Cheltenham coming through. And Sky Bet are on the charge. With money back as actual cash, up to £10 if you lose on the first race of the festival. Sky Bet. That's betting better. Applies to first bet on first race at Cheltenham on losing singles and win part of each way singles only. Money back as cash, free bet stakes excluded, eligibility restrictions, T's and C's apply. 18 plus, begambleaware.org.
It was a Sunday morning when I jumped on the tube.
And decided to pop down to Greenwich via
a large indoor jungle.
And when I got there, I was captivated by a sparkling
scary dinosaur just standing there right in front of me.
So off we went to Wembley Park
to look at the colourful fish.
Tap into the wonderful world of Off-Peak London. Travel in zones 2 to 6 for £1.50. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
£1.50 is an adult off-peak pay-as-you-go fare for a journey not going via Zone 1 on Tube, DLR and most London Overground services. Always touch in and out with the same card or device to pay the right fare.
At Asda, with our great range of beers and cider, it looks like you're hosting. Get 2 packs for just £18 or just £10 each. Like 12 bottles of Corona or 10 cans of Copperberg Cherry. Cracking brands, refreshing prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Offer ends 18th of March. 330 millilitres each. Drink aware.
From home offices to shared workspaces, however you work, at Starling Bank, we'll help you to keep your business flying. With easy integrations that connect your banking with your accounting software, your business is ready for takeoff. Starling Bank, helping business fly.
Spring cleaning? Jump to it with the unstoppable Bosch Unlimited Cordless Vacuum Cleaner from Curry's PC World. With a 30-minute runtime, the compact handstick leaps tirelessly from task to task. Cleans carpets, hard floors, shelves, lawns, flaky paintwork. Its rechargeable battery pack also fits Bosch garden and power tools. And you get a 1 in 10 chance to win £250 cash when you buy any Bosch cordless vacuum. Heroes of the home at Curry's PC World. Terms and register at currys250.co.uk.
Hey, big ears.
What?
Have you heard?
What?
Ford are offering £20 off a spring service.
You what?
That's right. £20 off when you book online using code FORD20. Problem is...
What?
We're rabbits.
Book now at Ford.co.uk or search Ford Service. Retail customers at participating Ford dealers cannot be used with other Ford service promotions. Only 1 voucher per customer per booking.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, it is Jobs Day, although it gets lost in all the news today. Jobs number came out well ahead of expectations. That's the last jobs report before the coronavirus. We'll get a sense of how this might play out going forward. Plus, we're going to talk to Robert Kahn of Eurasia Group on his 3 economic scenarios for the coronavirus. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg, what do you have?
Paul, this Tech Flash is sponsored by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the 6th straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth number 1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Stocks are down for a second straight day. Treasury yields are touching fresh records amid mounting concerns the coronavirus outbreak will derail economic growth. Now, one of the big stories of the day, oil is tanking as OPEC was unable to agree on a deep output cut to fight the spread of the COVID-19. Mohammed Darwaza Medley, Global Advisors Director of Geopolitics and Energy, tells Bloomberg a lack of oil demand will drive the price down even further.
I think once we started to realize that demand destruction is not a China issue, it's not a China and neighboring countries issue, once the virus began to spread in places like Italy, Iran, obviously a significant cluster, we had to downgrade that number even further. Now, we're looking at the global economy as a whole. Once the IMF potentially downgrades global GDP, and we saw the OECD report earlier in the week, suggests to us that we have to downgrade that number potentially again.
A statement is being made by OPEC Plus right now, and West Texas Intermediate's down almost 9%. More on that in a moment. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down 2.4%, down 72. The Dow's down 2.1%, down 540, and the Nasdaq's down 2.3%, down 201. The 10-year is currently up 1.8%. with a yield of 0.7229%. West Texas Intermediate's now down 8.5% at $41.98 a barrel. COMEX gold is little changed at $16.6730 an ounce. The dollar yen, 105.20. The euro, $1.1321, and the British pound, $1.3023. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We're getting lost in all the noise on the tape was today is a Jobs Friday. It's kind of a good news, bad news. The good news is we got a blowout number for the month of February, 273,000 jobs. The bad news is that's likely to be, the last good number we see for a while, potentially, given the effects of the coronavirus going forward. To help us break it all down, God Lebanon, Chief Economist for North America at the Conference Board. God, thanks so much for joining us. So let's just quickly hit the headline number that came across. What did you take away from the February jobs number?
It suggests that the economy was stronger, a little stronger than we expected, that in late 2019, early 2020, there was a recovery from some slowdown during 2019. And through February, the economy was moving in the right direction. At the same time, it's probably one of the most irrelevant jobs reports ever, because what will happen in March and April is going to be probably different.
So let's go there. I mean, this is all new to all of us, to the markets, to the medical community, to employers, quite frankly. Is there a sense of how you think this might play out in terms of the employment going forward over the next few months? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think, like many things, it depends on how long this will take. If it's just a matter of a month or two, then I think we'll see the impact more on hours worked than employment, perhaps more on hiring than on layoffs, because I think if it's a temporary things, company would not want to let go of workers, especially in such a tight labor market. But if it's more than that, if we're going through the summer and this is still going on, then I think the impact on the labor market will be stronger with layoffs, especially in some of the industries that are most impacted. It's a relatively low skill industries with high labor turnover regardless, so we may see some layoffs there.
And it's interesting. How quickly do you think we'll start to see it in some of the jobs numbers? Would it be maybe as soon as March, or do you think this might have a little bit of a longer tail?
I think in March we'll probably see a modest impact, because I don't think companies will start laying off in large numbers in March, hoping that this will bounce back in the spring. So I expect it to have less of an impact in March, but if the impact on economic activity continues through the spring, then I think in May, June, we will see stronger impact.
Tom from Summit, New Jersey wrote in and asked about revisions to this February number. It was a big number. Do you think we'll actually get some revisions downward once we get some kind of look back?
I'm not sure. There is the revisions to previous months were actually up, so I'm not sure that we'll see downward revisions this time.
All right, let's talk about the job market in general. I know you guys just came out with a report looking at blue-collar jobs. Mm-hmm. I know that's been tight, really tight in the marketplace. What were some of your conclusions of the work you guys did?
Yeah, I think a lot of people know that the labor market is tight in general, the unemployment rate at a 50-year low. But I think our work suggests that labor markets are much tighter for blue-collar and manual services workers than they are for the highly educated white-collar workers, which is the exact opposite of the trends that we've seen in recent decades. And we also see it in wage growth much faster for blue-collar and manual services. So that's, I think, an unprecedented almost...
What's causing this? Is this just that we're not training the next generation of tradesmen, for example, or what's going on there?
Well, part of it is demographics and education. So there are, a lot of the baby boomers who are now retiring are holding those blue-collar and manual services jobs, and many of the young generation that are entering the labor market, a much higher share of them are getting a BA degree they are not that interested in those jobs. So from an educational perspective, there is a shortage. Plus, there are several unfortunate trends in labor participation, labor force participation. Like there are more people on disability than there used to be. There are young people aged 25 to 34, especially men, who are, for various reasons, are not joining the labor force. So all of that is creating a squeeze on the supply side.
Interesting. God Lebanon, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you coming into our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. God is the chief economist for North America at the Conference Board. Talk about those job numbers. Again, tale of two cities here. Come out with 273,000 jobs added in the month of February. A very strong report, better than expected. But of course, that was before the economic effects of the coronavirus will really start to be felt. And so the question is, as the coronavirus makes its way not only around the world but around the U.S., what will be the economic impact and where are we going to see it? And I think the expectation is we'll certainly see it in the jobs numbers going forward. Just a quick data check. S&P down 68, Dow down 472, NASDAQ down 202. Again, yields just plunging here. The 2-year yield at 0.4588. That's down 14 basis points. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. for World and National Headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you got?
All right, Paul, thank you. As the coronavirus outbreak continues to unfold in the U.S., President Trump has signed a $7.8 billion emergency spending package.
It's an unforeseen problem, not a problem. Came out of nowhere, but we're taking care of it.
And now it's a problem in Indiana. The governor reported his state's first case moments ago, and a man who had recently traveled to Boston. Arizona has its third case. The University of Washington in Seattle is holding the rest of its classes this term virtually. Most of the 14 coronavirus deaths in the U.S. are in the Seattle area. President Trump had canceled a planned trip to the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta due to a suspected infection there. But the White House now says that was a false positive, and the trip is back on this afternoon. Right now, the president's in Nashville surveying the response to this week's deadly tornadoes in Tennessee. He's going to spend the weekend at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, where the White House says he will host Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro tomorrow. Joe Biden's Super Tuesday surge included a big turnout increase. About 33% more Democrats came to the polls than for Super Tuesday 2016.
What we're seeing now is a really energized electorate based on the numbers we're seeing so far out of the primaries, and that certainly does have some implications for both the remainder of the Democratic primary process and, more importantly, looking ahead to the general election.
Bloomberg's Kathleen Hunter says there's evidence of energy on the Republican side as well. About 1.9 million Republican Texans turned out to vote for President Trump, more than the Democratic vote. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Are you delayed at the dentist and now you're late for school pickup? You need a free now. Need to take the dog to the vet before lunch? Should have gotten a free now. Trying to get 4 kids and their baggage to the airport? Free now. Sometimes you can't get from A to B fast enough. Download the Free Now app today for quick pickups and reliable drivers, no matter the situation. Less hassle, more hustle with Free Now.
Incredible. This piece is my favourite.
Stunning. I can't look away.
Who's the artist?
It's clearly a Costa.
Oh, look, there's the artist now. What do you call this masterpiece?
We call it our velvety smooth flat white.
Crafted with the world's best beans and finished with a floret hand-drawn by expert baristas, the flat white at Costa Coffee really is a work of art. Visit the nation's favourite coffee shop and enjoy one today. The question, what is your favourite branded coffee shop, was asked. See costa.co.uk for full details.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Matt Letizia, what did you make of that performance today?
Well, it really was a game of two halves, to be honest, Jeff. Leicester came out in the first half really...
Letiz?
What's up, Jeff?
Run for it!
What the...
Move over, football. Cheltenham coming through. And Sky Bet are on the charge. With money back as actual cash, up to £10 if you lose on the first race of the festival. Sky Bet. That's betting better. Applies to first bet on first race at Cheltenham on losing singles and win part of each way singles only. Money back as cash, free bet stakes excluded, eligibility restrictions, T's and C's apply. 18 plus, begambleaware.org.
At Asda, with our great range of beers and cider, it looks like you're hosting. Get 2 packs for just £18 or just £10 each. Like 12 bottles of Corona or 10 cans of Copperberg Cherry. Cracking brands, refreshing prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Offer ends 18th of March. 330 millilitres each. Drink aware.
Are you ready, Stace?
To go down the giant flume?
Ready to speed down the flume, spin round the crazy rapids, and then take on that amazing wave pool?
Are we right behind you?
There'll be no hanging about on this Butlins trip, Stace. We are going to swim until we're wrinkly.
As long as you're not too tired for the Little Mermaid show tonight.
After a day in the pool, I'll practically be a mermaid. Bring it on.
For an exciting family break to Butlins this Easter, book online now. Are you ready to Butlins?
Petrol or electric? Why choose petrol and electric? Discover the BMW plug-in hybrid and electric range. 14th to the 21st of March. Visit your BMW retailer. Sometimes electric, always BMW. Participating retailers only.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
37. The 10-year is currently up 1.6% with a yield of 0.7371%. West Texas Intermediate crude's now down 7.7% at $42.37 a barrel, and COMEX gold's down 0.25% at $16.6420 an ounce. The dollar yen 105.32. The euro, $1.1307, and the British pound, $1.3009. U.S. employment surged last month with the biggest gain since May of 2018, indicating the labor market's on especially solid footing before the spread of the coronavirus intensified. Payrolls up 273,000. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, as the coronavirus continues to spread globally, strategists, economists, and investors trying to gauge out what the economic impact will be ultimately. The good folks at Eurasia Group have some thoughts there. Robert Kahn, Director, Global Strategy and Global Macro at the Eurasia Group based in New York City, joins us. Robert, thanks so much for joining us. I know you folks at Eurasia Group have done some work kind of trying to game out some scenarios here about how the economic impact could play out. What are some of the thoughts? What are some of the takeaways from your analysis?
Well, Paul, thanks for having me on the program. And yeah, we've spent a lot of time trying to provide more clarity on the political and the economic dynamics across various scenarios. We don't pretend to have great insight into the epidemiology. We leave that to the medical professionals. But we did take three alternative paths for the virus and then looked at the consequences of that. And the three paths, one is what we call a benign scenario, maybe mislabeled, maybe just an optimistic one, which is where the virus peaks within about 6 weeks, and that's based on a view that China and the other frontline states are able to contain it, and there's a very active strategy across the industrial world. We then also look at two more serious scenarios. One is where the peak in the propagation of the virus doesn't come to the middle of the year, till something like July. And then a third pandemic scenario in which the virus really continues to spread and propagate aggressively through the end of the year. What we find is that the political and economic dynamics are much more adverse in those second two scenarios, the July scenario and the end year scenario. And in a way, it's kind of intuitive that countries are, the politics in a lot of the industrial world are still kind of focusing on the day-to-day. There is a political resiliency to deal with this for a while. Firms can deal with supply chain disruptions for a period of time. But if this extends beyond the middle of the year, we see a lot more fracturing of the politics. We see a lot more pressure on supply chains, particularly in major companies and in the frontline sort of industries that are being affected. And we begin to worry a lot more about financial stress. And that's going to, of course, create some really big challenges for our leaders in terms of who to bail and who to fail. Public policy will face some very tough choices in those scenarios. And so that's the direction in which we looked at in these scenarios. So, Robert, what kind of probabilities, if you did at all, did you assign to these three scenarios? Are they fairly equal weighted, or is one more likely than the other at this point? We try to avoid putting specific probabilities on it because, I said at the beginning, there's so many different views out in the scientific community and so much uncertainty now, not just about the spread of the disease, but also the lethality of it. What I do stress to our clients, though, is that, if you go back a few weeks, we were really very much focused on a benign scenario. It was easy to look at what happened in SARS and look at some of the other disease threats where the markets bounced back very quickly after the initial shock, and to be hopeful for that. And I think now a lot of the people I talk to really are starting to focus, particularly on that middle scenario, that serious scenario in which the disease spreads aggressively through until the middle of the year, and are paying more attention to that. And I think what I would argue is that's not fully priced into our markets or to our political discussions. And so we're trying to encourage people to pay more attention to that, but I am avoiding trying to put a probability on it because I would probably get that wrong.
Yeah, interesting, Robert. We had Larry Kudlow, the director of the National Economic Council, on Bloomberg Television this morning with our own Jonathan Farrow, and Jonathan was really pressing him on what the government is actually doing. I mean, we've seen the Fed, come to the rescue with what we call an emergency rate cut earlier this week, but some people are concerned that maybe the U.S. government is not moving fast enough, maybe with some fiscal stimulus along those lines. What are your views there about kind of what the U.S. government has done to date?
Well, first of all, I listened to that interview, and Jonathan did a spectacular job on it because he raised exactly the right issues. A Fed rate cut, I think, was perfectly appropriate to provide some underpinning to demand, but particularly in the serious and severe scenarios, you have to be focused on the supply side dislocations. And so then you have to ask yourself, what is it we really need to be debating now and preparing now? It goes beyond helping households who can't get to work and helping small and medium firms. Those are really important steps, but we have to be debating what do we do on tariffs, because lightening tariffs does, in fact, alleviate the supply chain pressures and allows firms to go elsewhere and get the critical supplies they're not able to get from their main suppliers. We have to address issues like we did in 2008 of whether or not we're going to provide facilities to whole industries, particularly including large firms. And I understand the politics are tough there, but we need to be confronting those kind of issues. And while the Fed has some capacity to do that, and I'm sure is thinking about that, if we get into the extended scenarios, there are solvency questions. It's not just the liquidity, which is what the Fed is supposed to deal with. It really then becomes a fiscal issue as well. And so those were the right questions to put to Larry. He obviously couldn't go too far, but I wished he had been a little more forthcoming on the direction of travel for this administration.
So, Robert, in the work that you and your team did on this scenario analysis, what have we learned, from China, how this has played out in China in terms of timing? I guess we're 7 or 8 weeks into this playing out in China. What have we learned there?
Well, one big thing we learned is that there's a fascinating and important trade-off between very tough containment and economic rejuvenation. And as I'm sure you know, the scientists do debate whether, if you have a problem in the city, you just shut down the whole city, or do you focus on identifying the cases and tracing the contacts and then treating those people in a more limited fashion? The Chinese obviously had the political will and the capacity to shut down a whole province. They are now finding it is more difficult to reanimate economic activity at the end of that and get people back to work. And I think that type of tension, that's certainly one of the lessons we're learning. The other thing I think we're seeing is this issue of, protracted scarring of balance sheets. And this is a lesson I think we also learned in 2008, that when you have these deep financial and economic crises, however they come, and admittedly 2008 it was a different style of crisis than we're facing now, but I think there's a common point here, that when you have that, it leaves scars on the balance sheets of households, on the balance sheets of corporations. And it does take a long time to recover. And so the longer this goes on, the less likely it is you can get a V, and it's going to be more like some other letter of the alphabet. I think even the Chinese now, and we even wrote about it today to clients, the Chinese are understanding that a V-shaped recovery may not be in the cards.
Hey, Robert Kahn, thank you so much for joining us. Robert Kahn is the Director of Global Strategy and Global Macro for Eurasia Group, out with a really interesting report trying to game out some scenarios for how this coronavirus may impact the economies globally. Markets, again, selling off here. Equity markets off over 2%. Coming up, balance of power. David Weston coming up in just moments. He will drive the conversation forward. Risk off day. This is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. That's
Delayed at the dentist and now you're late for school pickup. You need a free now. Need to take the dog to the vet before lunch. Should have gotten a free now. Trying to get 4 kids and their baggage to the airport. Free now. Sometimes you can't get from A to B fast enough. Download the Free Now app today for quick pickups and reliable drivers, no matter the situation. Less hassle, more hustle with Free Now.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
This ad is made from 100% recycled commercials. Just like Smart Water's
all new
bottles are made from
100% recycled
plastic.
What's that number again?
100%. Every Smart Water bottle is made using recycled plastic, and because it's still
100%
recyclable, the plastic will be used again
and again.
Smart Water, now in a 100% recycled plastic bottle. Label and cap 100% recyclable, but not made from recycled plastic. Yet. We're working on it.
Matt Letizia, what did you make of that performance today?
Well, it really was a game of two halves, to be honest, Jeff. Leicester came out in the first half really...
Letiz?
What's up, Jeff?
Run for it!
What the...
Move over, football. Cheltenham coming through. And Sky Bet are on the charge. With money back as actual cash, up to £10 if you lose on the first race of the festival. Sky Bet. That's betting better. Applies to first bet on first race at Cheltenham on losing singles and win part of each way singles only. Money back as cash, free bet stakes excluded, eligibility restrictions, T's and C's apply. 18 plus, begambleaware.org.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, I'm David Weston. Welcome to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. On the brief today, Carl Riccadonna on the hiring surge last month in the U.S. before the coronavirus hit. Kevin Cirilli in Washington on the Trump administration's response to that virus. And in New York, Jeannie Zaino on the two-man race that has become the Democratic presidential nomination contest. Okay, so Carl, let's start with you. We got the jobs numbers out there. We're very encouraging in many respects. Good news, but as I say, before the virus.
Sure. So things looked great before the virus set in. When we look back to what was happening during the week where they were actually conducting the employment survey, stocks were just a hair's breadth from all-time highs. 10-year yields were about 160. So very different environment. And then the virus hits.
You know what? We want to hear exactly what you say, and your mic's down there. So let's try this again, Carl.
Sure.
I want to hear every word you say. There you go.
There
Try
we go.
it again.
Okay, a voice. So basically, this was a snapshot of the economy before all of the crisis hit, and it looked very strong. Although even there's a bit of a caveat because we had this very warm winter, which means that all of the seasonal factors for things like layoffs in the construction sector are behaving very strangely relative to what's ordinarily the case. So hiring looked good pre-crisis, but not quite as good as the headline numbers
So this is
suggest.
what I wonder. We had the job numbers going. Did we have the president speak and say, well, look, those are great numbers. We don't have much of a problem here. And you had Larry Kudlow, his chief economic advisor, saying, boy, maybe a little slow down, but we're looking good. Is this potentially an instance of good news being bad news in the sense that it makes the administration say, we don't need to worry about the economy very much?
That's a very big problem, and we can see investors are treating it accordingly. So when Larry Kudlow in his press conference is saying we need a targeted response here, narrowly targeted, controlled, temporary, targeted and temporary, I think was the expression he used. To me, this has echoes of summer of 2008 during the early stages of the financial crisis when we were again, in a presidential campaign, and John McCain's chief advisor, Phil Gramm, was talking about a mental recession in a nation of whiners. And when it became very clear that the McCain administration did not have a grasp on how to deal with a very fast-moving and large crisis, markets lost confidence, and that was when we suddenly saw the Obama team surge in terms of support, with hopes of having a better economic plan in place. And I think there's going to have to be a moment of reckoning here, where we realize we need a major multi-pronged approach on healthcare policy, monetary policy, so further accommodation from the Fed, and also a stronger fiscal
exactly
policy
right.
as well.
Okay, well said. Okay, thank you so much, Carl Riccadama. He's our chief U.S. economist. And now let's turn to Kevin Cirilli in Washington, D.C. We've gotten into this already a little bit, Kevin. The president and Larry Kudlow seem to be fairly confident about where we are. Do they know something we don't know?
They're still projecting optimism. And in fact, the president earlier today here at the White House signing $8.3 billion worth of an aid package that lawmakers advanced just a few days ago, bipartisan group, in order to combat the spreading coronavirus. Now, $3 billion of that package is going to go specifically towards vaccine research, and slightly more than $2 billion is going to be spread out in order to fight for preparedness throughout the country. Meanwhile, lawmakers also starting to look at the economic implications of this. Yesterday, Senator Marco Rubio, a Republican from Florida, saying that they are having open conversations in the Capitol about what would happen should the coronavirus have to impact legislators and get onto Capitol Hill. There have been reported cases in Pennsylvania and Maryland. Meanwhile, in addition to that, I caught up with Senator Mark Warner yesterday, David, Democrat from Virginia, top Democrat on the Intelligence Committee. He told me that he's looking at quote-unquote regulatory forbearance issues as it relates to the regulators giving a nod of sorts to financial institutions who may have to provide some more leniency for consumers as delays are becoming more anticipated over the next couple of months, potentially because of the coronavirus. David?
So, Kevin, that all sounds encouraging. We've got the $8.3 billion and things. But for me, it's sort of first things first. How do we know how many people have the disease right now? Because we haven't done the testing. Where is the testing? Where is Mr. Azar from HHS? Do we know where we are on testing?
In terms of the money that came specifically, a portion of that will actually go specifically toward the testing. Now, I can tell you that, to your point, there's been open conversations, and I've spoken with lawmakers yesterday about this particular issue, about the need for there to be free tests, about the need for there to be more public awareness as to how to, in fact, get tested. All of those questions are being openly discussed in real time. And the final point that you raised about data is crucial to all of this. Precisely. Yesterday, I spoke with two top officials in both parties who raised the concern that the data coming out of China is not to be trusted and has not been accurate. And so Senator Warner as well alluded to that as well. So a lot of questions are surrounding the how to get accurate data as it relates to the coronavirus.
Yeah, and certainly investors have a lot of questions as reflected in the markets even today. Okay, many thanks now to Bloomberg's chief Washington correspondent, Kevin Cirilli, reporting from the White House. And now let's bring in college professor and Bloomberg contributor Jeannie Zaino here in New York, because the coronavirus is the big story, no question about it. But we also have something of an election going on.
Something of an election.
At the same time. So give us a sense. We lost Elizabeth Warren yesterday, and then there were sort of two, except Tulsi Gabbard, but there were basically two running on the Democratic side. What is the path forward here, particularly as we look forward to next Tuesday when we have, I think, 10 primaries?
Yeah, it's going to be a big day, and really many people are sort of lining this up as your home state of Michigan being a really important state for Bernie Sanders. And we heard today he has canceled an appearance he had in Jackson, Mississippi, and he is putting all of his efforts now into Michigan. He really does feel like this is a must-win state for him. He is ceding the South, it is pretty apparent now, and the African-American vote to Vice President Biden.
And it was thought that he was doing very well in Michigan. He did very well in 2016 in Michigan, as I recall, beat Hillary Clinton fairly handily in the state of Michigan. At the same time, we have to remember he's for canceling the private health insurance. We have a lot of UAW workers, for example, from my home state of Michigan, and they're not too keen on losing their insurance that they've negotiated so hard for over the years.
Absolutely. This is one of the big question marks. He did so well with with these Midwestern states, including Michigan in 2016. And he has not changed his position on this issue of privatization of health insurance. And so how the union workers look at that, he does have some real support in Michigan. He's well organized. He's got a lot of money to spend up there. Joe Biden still has to catch up to him in that regard. But we also know that a lot of voters out there, what we're seeing from the exit polls from Super Tuesday, is a lot of voters out there and around the country really see this as a must-win for getting Donald Trump out. And so we may see voters, particularly late deciders, pushing themselves again to Joe Biden.
Fascinating. Okay, thank you so much to Jeannie Zaino. She is our Bloomberg political contributor. And now it's that time we're going to check on the markets and how they're reacting to today's stories. I'm almost hesitant to ask, but here she is, Abigail Doolittle. How are we doing, Abigail?
Well, yeah, another bearish day here for the markets. And I think what's really spooking investors, we of course have stock sliding, but I think it's the big rally in bonds. Bonds are in a epic record rally. The 10-year yield well below 1% at this point. So stock investors worrying what that's about. High yield spreads are also blowing out to levels last seen in 2018 and then in 2016. That tells you that those high yield bondholders that they're demanding more payment relative to Treasury because the risk picture is increasing. And then you and I have been talking about the unknown around this coronavirus. You cannot value the unknown. So that's the ultimate challenge faced by stock investors.
Well, I guess that maybe answers my next question, which is there a bottom? When you come to the yields, just take yields on the 10-year and things like that. Is there a bottom? Because if you were just paying attention to the bond market itself, you'd say we're headed toward a recession. This is really looking not very good.
Well, if you paid attention to the bond market, you could say that we're headed to a recession. The other day we were talking about the yield curve, and very interesting, we of course had that inversion last August. It was very brief, but when that is followed by steepening in the past, that has preceded a recession and also a market top. Relative to a bottom, I think that you really do need to know here in the U.S., have a better sense of what this coronavirus really is and what will the impact of it be on the corporate bottom, the corporate profit outlook. We just don't know right now. There aren't the tests out there, as you and Kevin were talking about. Until we have that information, traders are going to be very uncomfortable, and that's what all of these different barometers, market gauges are telling you.
Okay, thank you so much to Abigail Doolittle for that report on the markets. And we turn now to Mark Crumpton. He is here with Bloomberg First Word News.
David, thank you. President Trump has signed that $7.8 billion emergency coronavirus spending bill. The measure reimburses state and local governments for the cost of preparing for and fighting the virus. The president also said he believes the markets will recover from recent losses.
I think financial markets will bounce back as soon as this really bounce back. Don't forget, they're down probably 10 or 11% from, where they were, but they were up 70%. So, it's a relatively small piece.
Mr. Trump is set to visit the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta this afternoon. There are more than 200 confirmed infections in the United States. Iran warns it may use what it calls force to limit travel between cities. Iranian health officials didn't elaborate on that threat, but did acknowledge the coronavirus is now in all of the country's 31 provinces. Iranian media posted images of long lines of traffic as people try to reach the Caspian coast from Tehran, despite authorities telling people to stay home. There are more than 4,700 confirmed cases of the virus in Iran. 124 people have died. OPEC talks collapsed in Vienna today, sending oil prices plunging. Delegates failed to reach a deal as Russia refused to bend to pressure from the cartel to make deeper production cuts. It's the worst case scenario for OPEC, which took a high-stakes gamble that it could force Russia to join a 1.5 million barrel supply reduction. Oil producers are trying to offset the impact of the coronavirus, which has hammered demand. The United Nations Migration Agency reports what it calls a grim milestone regarding deaths of migrants who try to cross the Mediterranean. Officials now estimate that 20,000 people have died since 2014. That includes the presumed drowning of more than 90 people after a small boat overturned after leaving Libya last month, and the disappearance of a ship that set off from Algeria. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg David?
Thanks so much, Mark. Coming up, hiring surged last month in the United States, but can the labor market hold up as the coronavirus spreads? We ask Austin Goolsbee of the University of Chicago Booth School. That's next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
We've all been in one, but how much do you really know about black cabs? For instance, did you know that a black cab has to be tall enough to accommodate an individual wearing a bowler hat? That's a lot of space for you and your briefcase. Or that Free Now drivers can use the bus lanes, the perfect getaway to make your meeting in time. And with 2-minute central London pickups, you needn't waste time searching for a taxi. Just download the Free Now app today and take the hassle out of getting round London.
Incredible. This piece is my favourite. Stunning. I can't look away. Who's the artist? It's clearly a Costa. Oh, look. There's the artist now. What do you call this masterpiece?
We call it our velvety smooth flat white.
Crafted with the world's best beans and finished with a floret hand-drawn by expert baristas, the flat white at Costa Coffee really is a work of art. Visit the nation's favourite coffee shop and enjoy one today. The question, what is your favourite branded coffee shop, was asked. See costa.co.uk for full details.
How do you make the most understated Range Rover even more striking? Paint it Santorini black. Fit it with privacy glass. A full leather ebony interior. Then place it on 21-inch gloss black alloy wheels. The Range Rover Velar R Dynamic Black, understated, has rarely been so bold. Limited numbers available for a limited price. Search Range Rover Velar, Land Rover, above and beyond.
Limited availability while stocks last at participating UK Land Rover retailers. Check with your local retailer.
Despite never having used them, Alison Peartree was not initially a fan of purple bricks.
Because I heard from my uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker they don't have proper estate agents.
But Alison's uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker was wrong. Purple Bricks have experienced local agents ready to sell your home.
Turns out Martin from Purple Bricks was very knowledgeable. And he didn't charge commission. I've even recommended him to my sister's boyfriend's auntie's hairdresser, Sharon.
Purple Bricks. Book your free valuation today.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing service cost extra.
Mayday, Mayday, this is Red Dwarf. Our engines are dead and we're being sucked into a black hole. Can anyone hear me? Over?
The only thing that's over is us, Crichton. We're finished.
Guys, relax. I've got Smart Breakdown with the AA. It sends them your vehicle's fault data, so they should know what's wrong before they even get here.
I don't believe it.
What, that they'll already know what's wrong?
No, that you're actually capable of something useful.
The future of breakdown today. The AA. Drive smart. See theaa.com for details.
For up to 50% off a choice of floors and beds. For an extra 20% off selected ranges. For something for everyone. Carpet Right. For life.
You could find a £5, a tenner, a 20, or even a crisp 50 inside the Sun on Sunday. That's right, cash. Yes, real banknotes inside the paper. We're giving away a wallet-busting amount of cash this weekend only in the Sun on Sunday. It pays to read The Sun. T's and C's apply.
It was a Sunday morning when I jumped on the tube.
And decided to pop down to Greenwich via
a large indoor jungle.
And when I got there, I was captivated by a sparkling
scary dinosaur just standing there right in front of me.
So off we went to Wembley Park
to look at the colourful fish.
Tap into the wonderful world of Off-Peak London. Travel in zones 2 to 6 for £1.50. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. £1.50 is an adult off-peak pay-as-you-go fare for a journey not going via Zone 1 on Tube, DLR and most London Overground services. Always touch in and out with the same card or device to pay the right fare.
Welcome to Cathay Island. We hope you've enjoyed flying Cathay Airways. Oh, and Cathay, congratulations on the Euro Millions win.
Tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is a massive £26 million. That's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Estimated jackpot. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
At Asda, with our great range of beers and cider, it looks like you're hosting. Get 2 packs for just £18 or just £10 each. Like 12 bottles of Corona or 10 cans of Copperberg Cherry. Cracking brands, refreshing prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money. Live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Offer ends 18th of March. 330 millilitres each. Drink aware.
And downward facing dog.
Loren here runs her own hot yoga business. That's why she got QuickBooks. Now she can get paid, track income, and run payroll all in one place. Because no matter how hot the yoga studio gets, running her business is no sweat.
Save up to 60% for the first 6 months. Offer ends 9th of April. Visit quickbooks.co.uk for details.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn. The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Supply chain and manufacturing, and that's sort of what you've seen so far. But then the whole step two is the fear factor, and everybody self-regulating, self-quarantining, not going out to restaurants, not flying on airplanes, not going to the gym, and stuff like that. And my only point is if you look at the big rich economies, of which the U.S. is the biggest and the richest, our economies are more dominated by those face-to-face services than the Chinese economy is. So if everybody stops going out to restaurants and stops flying on airplanes and doesn't go on cruise ships and stuff like that, that's a bigger hit on our economy than it was in China. So hopefully the health and medical side will not show a virus spreading as rapidly here as it did in China. But if it does, I'm kind of nervous that the impact on growth would be even bigger than the really major impact they already had in China.
Yeah, and Austin, you make a terribly important point, which is, first and foremost, this is a health issue and a personal tragedy, frankly, for people who are dying. We should focus on that. At the same time, there are economic effects, and that's what we're talking about here, are the economic effects. Let's talk about what one might do about it, because we, as I say, don't really know. There's an over and under on this that's pretty big, it seems to me, about how bad it might be or how it might not be that bad. Let's talk about what could be done. Let's start with monetary policy. As you know, we had the Fed with an emergency rate cut of 50 basis points this week, and we had the chairman, Jay Powell, go out and talk about why that was. I talked with Larry Summers for an episode of Wall Street Week that will air tonight at 6 o'clock, and this is what he said. He was not very complimentary of what Mr. Powell did. This is what he said.
The choreography was a calamity. I mean, what was the reason for foreshadowing it on Friday, except to assure that you'd create a buy on the rumor, sell on the news situation? What was the reason for continuing to have leaks coming out of the system early in the week? I don't see how they could have thought that this was going to be highly effective.
And Austin, as you know, the markets did not react particularly well to what was done there. Did the Fed make a mistake? Did Jay Powell make a mistake?
You know, I don't know. I think Secretary Summers is right that anytime you get the Fed either leaking information or foreshadowing, we're thinking about on Monday doing this, you open the door to rapid trading and kind of dealing in information, which can be problematic. Now, the Fed is not alone. You've seen around the world the central banks trying to come forward saying, we see that this could be a problem, and we just want everyone to know that we're on it and we're willing to cut rates. The thing that makes me kind of nervous is the double whammy. That first, we all know that the Fed's got a lot shorter runway because rates are starting lower than they normally are at trying to fight recessions. And then the second is a virus-induced recession in which people just don't want to leave their houses for a couple of months or so as they wait for the virus to go by. That strikes me as a very different scenario than a normal business cycle. And so I don't know that tax cuts or rate cuts or those, maybe we should be thinking about monetary and fiscal stimulus, but I'm a little afraid that even if we do those stimuli, that we're going to come back and look and say, their impact was much smaller than they normally are because for whatever reason, you gave a tax cut. Nobody still wanted to leave their house to go spend their tax money. And so I think we're going to, if this gets here, it causes us, we ought to redouble our efforts to try to slow the spread of this virus, because if it does get here, I don't think that dealing with the economic impacts of it are going to be as easy as maybe people think.
Boy, that sure sounds right. I think that we got to do whatever we can, including testing, to know how big a problem we really have, because right now we don't have a sense of that. But as opposed to stimulus through fiscal, what about remediation in this sense? We're going to have a lot of small businesses particularly who are going to really be stressed if, in fact, we don't have people going out to dinner, if they're not buying airplane tickets and things like that. Should we be having a facility in place to try to help tide them over, maybe even loans, sort of the way FEMA would do when a tornado struck?
Yeah, in a way, it's exactly the style of thinking that the Fed uses at the discount window in a crisis. That if you say, look, the financial institutions are long-run solvent, there's just a short-run panic going on. I think they ought to be open to explore all kinds of things like that. And now that's probably on the fiscal side, not the Fed that does it. But I think they should be open to thinking through things like that. If it has this feature that everybody's going into hiding for a short period, but we think that in a few months it's going to come back to something like normal.
Okay, thank you so much, Austin, for being with us today. Really appreciate it. It's Austin Goolsbee. He's former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Obama. Still ahead here, a strong jobs report hasn't been enough to calm investors' concerns about the coronavirus. Stocks are plunging as treasuries surge. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Revisions, return policies, there are so many ways to redo a decision.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Do they have any path other than the courts?
Except here, we have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war. Are there winners?
So that you can too.
How does your modeling have to pivot to reflect a different scenario?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Stocks are tumbling for a second day while Treasury yields plunge to new record lows over concerns about the coronavirus and what effect it may have on the global economic recovery. We now have Kaylee Lines here with more. What's going on?
Yeah, well, we're heading back down toward the lows of the session. The S&P 500 is now down by about 3%. I would say that is really a dramatic move, but we have moved by more than 2.5% every single day this week. Remember, we started this week with a big move to the upside. We have now wiped out our gain for the week. And I think what you're seeing is a stock market that is starting to reflect the same amount of fear you're seeing in the bond market. Anywhere you look, when it comes to treasuries, even bonds, which hit record lows earlier today, you are seeing yields absolutely tumble. The 10-year is now at about 72 basis points. And the farther out you go on the curve, the more dramatic it is. The 30-year down by 27 basis points. That is the biggest one-day drop since all the way back back in 2011. So you're seeing some serious reflection on how concerned the market is about the economic growth story.
And by the way, that should be enough, but it's not. We have oil with an OPEC deal that got blown up, and look at what's going on with oil.
I mean, WTI is down more than 8%. That is on pace for its worst day since all the way back in February of 2015, now at its lowest since August of 2016. OPEC now picks to not get a deal during what could potentially be one of the more serious demand shocks the oil market has seen in many, many years. So it's a really brutal story. And of course, oil, as we know, also tied to economic growth. It's just a painful day, and no surprise, you're seeing energy stocks hit incredibly hard off the back of that in today's session.
Exactly, and they didn't get a deal after they got everybody's hopes up.
Right.
In some ways, even worse. It said, we have a deal, no, we don't. Okay, many thanks now to Bloomberg's Kaylee Lyons. Up next, are the policymakers in Washington measuring up to the task of dealing with the health crisis? We're going to talk with political science professor Michael Berkman of Penn State. That's next on Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are tumbling for a second day amid mounting concerns the coronavirus outbreak will derail economic growth. The Dow is falling 506 points, S&P down 78, the Nasdaq dropping 239 points. Crude oil plunged more than 7% to $42.47 a barrel. But on the positive side, U.S. employment grew in February. The Labor Department says the economy added 273,000 jobs last month, and the jobless rate edged down to 3.5%. But the positive job numbers were before the coronavirus spread intensified, and economists think that the March job numbers will be much lower. And a 5G version of the iPhone could be delayed by a month. A Bank of America analyst says the coronavirus could cause production issues and hurt demand. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Leaders are born.
What does it take to get the markets back on the rails?
Born leaders are here.
The timeline for that can be slow.
Karen Moscow.
Several nations are negotiating to evacuate diplomats.
And Nathan Hager.
How are you advising clients to navigate the shifting headlines?
Bloomberg Daybreak, weekday mornings at 5 Eastern.
Are we heading into correction territory, do you think?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
From New York, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. For Bloomberg First Word News, we go now to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you. President Trump will visit the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta this afternoon. The trip was initially canceled because of concern that someone at the CDC may have contracted the coronavirus. The president will stop there before he goes to his Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach, Florida for the weekend. Mr. Trump is first headed to Nashville, where he plans to meet with Tennessee's governor and survey this week's tornado damage. More than 100,000 people around the world have been confirmed to have the coronavirus. The number jumped after a spike in reported cases in Europe and Iran. One positive note, however, China is seeing a drop in the number of infections and deaths. That's where the coronavirus outbreak began. The Trump administration has moved a step closer to requiring the collection of DNA samples from many undocumented immigrants being held on criminal charges in the United States detention facilities. Under a new rule, the Department of Homeland Security can collect samples that would be put into a massive database operated by the FBI, used to identify and locate violent criminals in the country illegally. Civil liberties groups say it sets a dangerous precedent. Families of those who died in the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 in 2014 are bracing for a trial that begins next week in the Netherlands. 3 Russians are accused of mass murder for their alleged roles in the shooting down of the plane over Ukraine. The jet was headed from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur when it was brought down by a missile fired from Russian-controlled territory. Russia has denied any involvement. All 298 people on board were killed. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks very much, Mark. Each day brings new disturbing news about the spread of the coronavirus and the threat to our people and our economy. It's a time when we turn to our government for leadership. Well, is it delivering what we need and should expect? We turn now to an expert on how governments work. He's Professor Michael Berkman of Penn State, where he is the director of the McCourtney Institute for Democracy. So welcome, Professor. Really good to have you here. Let's go to that core question. How do governments, our government, particularly the United States, how does it respond to a healthcare crisis like this?
Well, it's complicated because of federalism, of course. So the national government has certain responsibilities, and I think the public largely turns to the national government for information and to feel confident about how things are being handled. But the state governments are actually responsible for a lot of the public health measures that will affect people's lives.
Well, that federalism always complicates things. It's our strength and sometimes maybe our weakness as well. But to what extent do we have a sense of the extent to which the United States government, through the CDC and other federal agencies, is able to influence or even direct the state and the local agencies? So we have, for example, similar protocols across the country.
Right. And, of course, they can help with money, which is what happened today. So the president signed a bill which is going to provide more funds to state and local governments to deal with this. And then, of course, the federal government can also set certain requirements and regulations as circumstances might require. But to this point, I mean, most of the travel bans, of course, travel restrictions come out of the federal government, but then states are setting up their own states of emergency and social distancing rules and things along those lines.
At the same time, I would think that it would be a pretty courageous state official who stood up and disagreed with the federal government if they did come out with guidelines and so on. I mean, presumably all of our government officials, state, local, and state and federal, all want the same thing, which is to get rid of this thing as fast as we can.
Of course, that's absolutely true.
So yes. There's something of a bully pulpit.
They try to be on the same page. Yes, and I think that the White House is doing a better job on the optics of communicating each day what's going on. I think the experts have been out front and taking a vocal role, and that's important because people look to Washington for that.
What about clarity of communication? Because there hasn't always been agreement among some of the officials that we're hearing from about some of the numbers, some of the fact and figures. For example, on the test kits.
Yes, well, it's not unusual in this administration for the president to sometimes disagree with his own administration. We've seen that here. I think in the case of a health emergency, it can be particularly concerning. People are looking for information, they're looking for accurate information, and they're looking for consistent information. The testing is, to me, a real problem because when they do start testing, then we're going to suddenly see a lot more cases.
Exactly, and even before you get to that, it's unclear how many kits are going out. We've had various numbers out of the Secretary of Health and Human Services about how many are going out, maybe 100,000 or something. But as I understand, even after they go out, there's some training for administering the testing. We may get inconsistent results or even some false positives or negatives.
I'm sure. Yes, it's going to take a while till they get this down. This is the kind of thing that should have been set up and ready to go in advance. And, I think if there's most of the concern right now with what's come out of Washington, it has to do with setting up and being prepared for this in the time from which after which we first heard about this in China till it really got over here.
What about the idea of having the vice president be in charge of it all? And on the one hand, that's a pretty senior official. That's a good thing. He has a lot of experience in government. On the other hand, he has some other things to do. And let's be frank, he's not somebody the president can fire if it goes wrong.
Well, that is a good point. At least he can't fire him right now. What he does with them going forward is another story altogether. I mean, it makes sense to put somebody in charge who has a good handle on how government works and who is in a position to be able to talk to different parts of government and get them to work together. So from that perspective, putting somebody like the vice president in charge it makes some sense. I mean, President Obama also did not put a health professional in charge during the Ebola crisis. He put somebody in charge who knows how government works. So that part of it makes sense to me. In terms of his time, I can't say I know for sure what else the vice president was doing. I'm sure he's able to find time for this.
What about the role of Congress? As you said, the Congress can appropriate money, which it has done now with this $8.3 billion that the president signed today, that bill. What other constructive role can the Congress play? Or is this really an executive branch function?
Well, it's very much an executive branch function, but I think Congress has an important responsibility here in terms of oversight, in terms of getting information about what had been done, about what will be done, in terms of providing a place to ask difficult questions.
So if you were advising the President of the United States today, what would you advise him to do? What's the one thing that he's not doing that he should do, or the government is not doing it should do, or the one thing it might be doing that maybe it should stop doing?
Well, I think he should be much more careful in his own public comments. That I doubt will be received all that seriously, but it's confusing at times when he's saying things in interviews, for example, that contradict or not fully consistent with what we're hearing from his health professionals.
Okay, thank you so very much, Professor. That is Michael Berkman of Penn State. He's a professor of political science there. Coming up, will the government give fiscal support to the economy? I posed that question on this week's Wall Street Week episode. Part of that conversation comes up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
Delayed at the dentist and now you're late for school pickup. You need a free now. Need to take the dog to the vet before lunch. Should have gotten a free now. Trying to get 4 kids and their baggage to the airport. Free now. Sometimes you can't get from A to B fast enough. Download the Free Now app today for quick pickups and reliable drivers, no matter the situation. Less hassle, more hustle with Free Now.
You could find a $5, a $10, a $20, or even a crisp $50 inside the Sun on Sunday. That's right, cash! Yes, real banknotes inside the paper. We're giving away a wallet-busting amount of cash this weekend only in the Sun on Sunday. It pays to read The Sun. T's and C's apply.
It was a Sunday morning when I jumped on the tube.
And decided to pop down to Greenwich via
a large indoor jungle.
And when I got there, I was captivated by a sparkling
scary dinosaur just standing there right in front of me.
So off we went to Wembley Park
to look at the colourful fish.
Tap into the wonderful world of Off-Peak London. Travel in zones 2 to 6 for £1.50. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
£1.50 is an adult off-peak pay-as-you-go fare for a journey not going via Zone 1 on Tube, DLR and most London Overground services. Always touch in and out with the same card or device to pay the right fare.
Shh! Whisper it. This LG Turbo Wash with AI Direct Drive will soon be your strong, silent hero. One of the UK's quietest and quickest washing machines, it uses a jet spray to cut your washing time to under an hour. More convenience, less hassle. And with all LG appliances, you can save up to £100 when you trade in your old one. Heroes of the home at Curry's PC World. Full terms at currys.co.uk.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
TuneIn's your destination for college basketball, and it's free.
Down the right side of the lane, jumper up and go.
This week, we have a must-hear game. North Carolina at Duke.
2 for the win! No, tapped up by more! And it is the Blazers! More, baby!
This Saturday, tip-off is at 6 p.m. Eastern.
Kimball right of the lane against the SU zone to Warren.
With college basketball on TuneIn, you can hear every call from games around the country live. Search college sports to listen free today. The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Guidance. I think that is proceeding because we have a lot of great professionals in all those different areas. There's another dimension to this, which is communications, and it's very important that there be clear and consistent communications because fear and panic always happen with public health crises. And here I think we get mixed reviews at the moment because we have multiple messages coming out of the federal government, different messengers, confusion about testing and other things. And I think it's really important, it's going to be very important for the long term, that the people that the American public are hearing from are people with credibility, with scientific backgrounds who can be trusted. And so I would like to see more of a consistent and confident communications effort.
Dr. Sharfstein, I'm so glad that you mentioned testing, because for us who are lay people, not really professionals in this, we can't quite understand why we're not testing more people, because it's hard to really address the problem if we don't know how big the problem is. And without testing, can we really know how many people, for example, have it in the United States of America right today?
Yeah, we do not know how many people have it because there's been some problems with the test. The test that the Centers for Disease Control created didn't really work out of the box, and we've been sort of playing catch-up ever since. The FDA issued a policy to try to rapidly scale up testing, even before the agency could review the specific tests, and that's going to lead to a lot more testing availability, and hopefully will address this initial problem. But I think even though it's absolutely true we need more testing and we've had a big problem standing up testing, it's also important for people to understand that they don't necessarily need a test right now. There's a lot of sometimes thinking in this situation that if I just got a test, that could be reassuring. But the truth is, with an illness that has a 14-day incubation period, you could get a negative test and the next day you could get sick. So using testing wisely and really understanding the results becomes really important. Right now, I think the priorities for testing are people who are sick, who have serious cough, pneumonia, and no explanation for their symptoms. Anyone who is part of a investigation of a particular case, but people who just wake up and have no known exposure and are basically feeling fine and just wondering whether they have it, this is not the time to go to the emergency department. Number one, you don't want to crowd the emergency department, and number two, you don't want to sit next to someone in the waiting room who might have coronavirus. So it's really important to put texting in context, even as we realize we don't have enough right now.
Doctor, I want to interrupt us just for a moment now, because a red headline just crossed the Bloomberg that the World Economic Forum has postponed its Riyadh summit until next year. This is, of course, not Davos. This is the one they have in Riyadh. But the one in Riyadh now has been postponed until next year. Not the only one of these sorts of events that right now is being postponed because of the coronavirus threat. So, Doctor, let's come back and let me ask you, as a public health expert, we think of this as a medical problem, as a scientific problem. Is there also a socioeconomic aspect to it? That is to say, some of the people maybe most affected and least able to address the problem may be the poorest among us. And even, for example, with respect to testing, as I understand, these tests cost some substantial amount of money. I've heard $2,000, $3,000. Most people in the United States, as we know, 40% of the country can't afford $400 for an emergency. Is there a socioeconomic danger here that actually it will spread worse among the lower socioeconomic classes because they don't have the wherewithal to deal with it?
Well, here's the thing. When it's an infection like this, it affects everyone. So if there are people who can't afford to get tested, or even worse, they can't afford to get treated and isolated, they have to go to work because it's the only way they can get money, then that risks everyone. You know, somebody who works in a restaurant, it's the diners who could be at risk. So it's really important for us to see this as everyone's in it together, and we really do have to help people who don't have financial means make sure they can get the testing, the treatment, and other economic support that they need. And that really does protect all of us.
Dr. Sharfstein, you said earlier that we may be playing from behind a little bit when it comes to the test kits. I don't know about other aspects of our response, but do you have a sense that we are catching up? As a country, as a government, particularly the federal government, are we catching up if we are playing from behind?
Yes, I think that in some respects we're catching up. I think in other respects we're doing, very well. I'm so impressed with the National Institutes of Health launching different kinds of studies right away, really in record speed, to try to eventually get to a vaccine or treatments that can save lives. I think that's very promising. But I do think that there's still some major question marks about whether the overall response is going to be led from a scientific viewpoint or not.
At the same time, we just had a political science professor, Professor Berkman from Penn State, on talking about the federal system of government. Is there a quality control potential issue here that you don't have, for example, in China? The regime in China and Beijing can decide what happens, and it happens. Here you have a federal government, you have got state, you've got local public health officials. Should we be concerned that there may be some disagreement or a failure to have consistency across the federal government?
Well, I think that that's both a strength and a weakness, but in many ways it's a strength of our system because I've been a local health officer. I was the health commissioner for Baltimore City here, and I'll tell you that local health officers are often some of the most trusted people in their communities. And if you're trying to reassure people in times of anxiety, having somebody, I would stand next to the doctors from Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland, other hospitals, and we would provide updates and information and reassurance and guidance on things like Ebola or influenza. And so it's the same people, it's people you trust in your community. So I think having that system where it's not just one person in the White House talking and that same message is amplified sort of robotically, but that people who are trusted in communities can really help their communities make it through this, I think that that will prove to be a strength for our system.
Doctor, this has been very helpful. Thank you so much for your time. That's Dr. Joshua Sharfstein from Johns Hopkins University's School of Public Health. He also is the author of the Public Health Crisis Survival Guide. We should also know that the school that he actually serves at is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, our parent company. One of the big questions about our response to the coronavirus is whether and when the government will give fiscal support to the economy overall, or to specific sectors that are being particularly hard hit. On this week's Wall Street Week, we talked with economists Dambisa Moyo and Nuveen's Brian and Nick about how realistic it is to expect the United States government is going to be able to put forward substantial fiscal help to those who need it.
I think that there's a sort of rule of thumb when I was on the Goldman Sachs trading floors many years ago, was don't think about what politicians and policymakers should do. Think about what they will do. And we know that the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, is forecasting significant pressures by 2030 around the U.S. fiscus, both in terms of debt, but also in terms of deficits. We're already looking at a $1 trillion deficit this year. So when I think about corporates and generally incomes and living standards in the United States, what is it that I know to be true? And for my sensibilities, regardless of a Democratic or a Republican presidency, I think ultimately we know that taxes are going to rise.
Well, that's interesting. We have to worry about the fiscal side. At the same time, we don't hear about that from either side. Yeah. There are no fiscal hawks
There's
left.
no plans to reform Social Security or Medicare on any of these platforms.
We're not going to touch those entitlements.
What's interesting is if you compare the growth during the second Obama term versus what almost is the completion of the first Trump term, the biggest difference is fiscal policy. Extremely loose during the Trump administration and extremely tight during the second Obama term because of the mix of government. So what happens when you get a Democrat in the White House and you have at least a partially Republican Congress, that's the only scenario where I think you get fiscal tightening because the Republicans don't want to give the Democratic president everything they want in terms of the sort of the budget and the appropriations. So that is the White White House in 2021 is you could see, at least on the discretionary side, some of these kind of budgetary constraints start to come back in.
You can catch the full episode of Wall Street Week airing on Bloomberg Television and Radio starting this evening at 6 o'clock New York time and continuing through the weekend. Coming up here, equities and yields falling again today. We cover the markets next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
If morning is not your favorite part of the day, then maybe you're not listening.
We finally start to make a move.
Tom Keene.
What would you expect from Bezos next?
Jonathan Farrell.
How uncomfortable should central banks be with this situation?
Morning should be good for you.
We had no idea where this would head on that morning after.
Bloomberg Surveillance. Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council. Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at Babbel.com. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It has been, I think it's fair to say, quite a week in the markets. And here to wrap it up on this Friday afternoon is Katie Alliance. We have a little time left to trade, but where are we?
Well, right now we are lower. We're lower for a second day. You're seeing really any kind of optimism that may be out there about possible fiscal stimulus, monetary policy easing, really outweighed by the fact that the market is at this point very concerned about the coronavirus. Right now we're down by about 2.5% on the S&P 500. If we hold at these levels, it will mean every single day this week saw a move of 2.5% or more. It has really been a roller coaster. This week alone, we've seen an up day of more than 4%. We've seen a down day of more than 4%. And at the end of it, if you were to look at a 5-day chart of the S&P 500, we're going to be essentially flat. At least right now on the week, we're only down by 0.2%. Wow. So for all that drama, we basically got nowhere.
Yeah, and by the way, 2.5%, that's not a great number, but it's better than it was at one point today. You know, it's off the lows. In fairness, it's come back up. Why is that?
We're also off the highs. I mean, the market really has yet to make up its mind, I think. And we've gotten some conflicting reports. We were hearing from James Bullard, the St. Louis Fed president, on Bloomberg Television earlier today. Then we heard from Larry Kudlow. We also heard from President Trump when he was signing that nearly $8 billion coronavirus spending package. All of them sending different signals about how and when they're willing to act. You had Bullard saying, we'll do everything that we can. Everything is on the table. You had Trump saying the Fed should cut. It's up to them to still stimulate. And then you had Larry Kudlow saying, well, fiscal stimulus maybe is
temporary and targeted. He kept saying temporary and targeted, but we're not ready to talk about it yet.
Yeah, so I think the market just doesn't have a lot of faith in any of those particular actions because we're getting such mixed messaging. But on that targeted stimulus, one thing that is higher in the equity market today, which has not been the case for really the past several weeks, is airlines. Wow. Because part of that targeted stimulus conversation, according to reports, is maybe deferred taxes for industries like travel and airlines that have been heavily impacted by the virus. So it's actually the likes of United, American, which I should say are down some 40% on the year. They're actually a little bit higher in today's session.
Well, in that interview on Bloomberg, Larry Kudlow says, I don't want to talk about the airlines. We'll talk about that later. I want to talk about that. But they were in to visit the White House. And I thought he was sort of signaling, yeah, we're thinking about the airlines at least.
Yeah, so I guess we'll see what happens, and we'll see what happens in terms of all fiscal policy, monetary policy. What I will say is in terms of monetary policy and just growth prospects in general, for everything we're seeing in equities, it is nothing compared to what we're seeing in the bonds.
We're not going to end up flat in the bond market.
Absolutely not. I mean, I am looking at a chart right now that just shows the move in the bonds so far in 2020. I would remind you we are about 2 months into the year, 110 basis points lower on the 30-year, 117 basis points lower on the 10-year. We're sub 75 basis points on the 10-year yield. I mean, these moves have been so dramatic. They've been so rapid. And I think what you're seeing today is the stock market really trying to catch up to the bond market in terms of how much the market should fear this coronavirus.
Well, and the market's expecting further cuts out of the Fed. I mean, certainly by their next meeting, if not before.
Well, yeah, if not before. That was actually one of the more interesting parts of that Bullard interview. He said, we can act at any time. Don't just focus on March 18th. It could come at any time. But as for what the market's pricing, nearly 4 cuts in 2020. So they're expecting the rate to be about 25 basis points by the end of this year. That is very high expectation.
And the Fed did act at any time this week, and how did the markets react? Not so well. They didn't like it so much, so I'm not sure that worked.
I'm not sure
so
it had the intended.
No, exactly right. Okay, many thanks to Bloomberg's Kaylee Lines for that report on the markets. Coming up here, Balance of Power is going to be continuing on Bloomberg Radio. In our second hour, we're going to stay across the response to coronavirus and the markets, and for that matter, on the voters as well. And remember, you can catch the full episode of Wall Street Week airing on Bloomberg Television at 6 o'clock this evening. That will be on Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Amid the gloom of coronavirus impact around the world, from the $1.7 trillion tourism industry being at risk to the James Bond sequel No Time to Die being moved from April to November, there's one bit of good news. Private jet bookings are up. As the wealthy aim to duck risk on commercial flights, private jet charter firms have seen a 25% spike in business. It's not cheap, but it can be relatively competitive with luxury commercial travel. The cost of flying round trip from New York to London on a 12-seat Gulfstream 4 is about $140,000. That compares with $10,000 for a first-class ticket flying commercial, although those have lie-flat beds. Even after COVID-19 has passed, the business bump may remain stateside. The U.S. has surged ahead as the world's top hotspot for the fabulously rich. According to the Knight Frank's 2020 Wealth Report, the number of $30 million-plus fortunes in the U.S. rose 6% last year. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
When you put together the puzzle that's today's business and political environment,
Can you make a call given this swirl of data?
Is that already being reflected in the way that they're priced?
make sure you have all the pieces.
Which segments of Alphabet's business are most likely to come under scrutiny?
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction. Will he have to abide by a subpoena?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Right now, Doctors Without Borders medical teams are operating in some of the most remote and dangerous corners of the world. When front yards become front lines, at the crossroads of conflict and epidemic, where there are no hospitals, that's where we operate. Your response is critical to our response in places where few others will go. That's where we operate. Learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Another day of steep losses. Wall Street heading for a losing week. S&P 500 index down 78 right now. That is a drop of 2.6%. We've got the Dow down 511, a drop there of 2%. Nasdaq down 231 points for the Nasdaq Composite Index. That is a drop of 2.9%. 10-year yield 0.75%. Stocks plunged. Treasury yield sank. Credit markets suffered the worst day in a decade, with fears mounting that the government response to the spreading coronavirus will not prevent an economic slump. S&P 500 index's two-day rout now hitting 6%, wiping gains from earlier in this roller coaster week as the spreading virus shakes investor confidence in the world's largest economy. The White House, meanwhile, is working on targeted measures that could be rolled out quickly to address the economic impacts of the coronavirus. This, according to White House advisor Larry Kudlow, offering a glimpse of what a fiscal response could look like if the effects spread. And Kudlow was interviewed on Bloomberg Radio and television this morning after today's jobs report.
The labor market looks excellent. Very strong, and incidentally, most sectors of the economy look strong. We're through the first 2 months of the first quarter, right? So we got January and February, and some of the China influence is already affecting us, but the numbers are probably better than anybody thought.
Indeed, America's economy posted the biggest payroll gain in almost 2 years, 273,000 in February. That could provide a cushion against the coronavirus, which is starting to hit some industries. Airlines, for example, another day where they have actually turned things around. We have got the American Airlines Group up by 1.9%, UAL up 4.9%, Delta higher by 1.9%. But elsewhere in the travel industry, another down day for a lot of the cruise lines. Carnival, for example, dropping 2%. Royal Caribbean down 2.1%. Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings down by 0.4%. Hard hit for the year as well. For example, Carnival is down 46.2% so far this young year. Oil, also a major story this Jobs Friday. Oil heading for the biggest plunge since 2015 on signs of a breakdown in the global producer alliance that has helped cushion crude's recovery from the worst crash in a generation. West Texas Intermediate crude plunging today by 7.8%. WTI now with a 42 handle, 42.30 on West Texas Intermediate crude. Brent, the global benchmark, down 7.2% at 46.38 a barrel. Gold down 0.4% at 16.65 the ounce, and again worth repeating on the 10-year, 0.74%. Recapping, S&P lower by 76 points, down 2.5%. The Dow down 498. That is a drop of 1.9%, while Nasdaq is down 247, a drop today of 2.8%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
We have the strongest economy by far in the world.
We're going to grow our trade relationship.
I know what's broken. I know how to fix it.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
They've got the money they need to run a very competitive race.
We've got now a real crunch few days for Brexit.
We want certainty in the markets. We want certainty in our trading relationships.
The administration is trying to create a new divided world.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
It's all about the coronavirus, from businesses to voters and most certainly to the markets, as the country tries to come to terms with the unknown. From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, welcome now to the second hour of Balance of Power. Markets are in turmoil again today as equities fall along with bond yields, and it's all because of the coronavirus. But the jobs numbers don't include the virus, and they came in higher than expected. President Trump's chief economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, called it a blowout.
273,000 jobs, and with revisions, 358,000 jobs. That's a blowout, and wage rates still rising, and, you know, the blue-collar boom we've talked about, still there from these data. Middle-income, lower-wage people are outperforming their managers.
For a read on where we are, we welcome now Neil Bradley. He's U.S. Chamber of Commerce Executive Vice President and Chief Policy Officer. So, Neil, you are in touch with your members. You know a lot about business across the country. How do they regard the economy right now in the United States?
Well, thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me. You know, it's
two stories right now. The first story is just what you heard from Larry Kudlow, is the economic fundamentals. They're incredibly strong. In fact, the biggest problem that we have in the workforce right now is we don't have enough people that we can pull into the workforce to fill the open jobs we have to keep the economy growing. And, that's the underlying basis. A plethora of jobs, a need to fill them, rising wages, buoying consumers. On the other hand, we're all paying attention to what's going on today with the coronavirus and the headwinds that's creating, at least temporarily. And we have to figure out how we deal with both of those things simultaneously. And that's what we're talking to our members about.
As you know better than I, Neil, the U.S. economy has really been sustained by the U.S. consumer consistently, month after month. Do we have any sense on the ground out there in real time across the country if the consumer is getting more hesitant to spend money because of this coronavirus?
We've not seen that yet. Obviously, consumer sentiment remains strong in the measures and indexes we have. There's some early polling data that's just coming in from this week that seems to indicate that consumers aren't pulling back on their spending yet. But obviously, we're in initial stages of this. One of the advice that we're giving both to our member businesses, but also to our partners in government, is that the most important thing we can do is maintain that confidence of the American consumer. They need to be prudent, they need to plan and be responsible, but they shouldn't panic. In most places in America today, the professional recommendation of our public health officials is business as usual. Smart, wash your hands. If you're sick, don't come into work. But otherwise, we should be traveling, we should be attending the meetings, we should be going out our normal workaday business.
Should be traveling, should be going to meetings, but it's not clear we are. People are canceling various events. We just had the World Economic Forum cancel their Riyadh event, for example. And there are reports that actually the airlines particularly are getting hit hard. I can't believe that the hotels are far behind. Are you seeing any differentiation among the sectors?
Well, we're certainly seeing airlines, and I think you're right, folks involved in travel and tourism who are most likely to get hit. In addition to the folks who've already been hit by the disruptions in the supply chain, particularly with respect to China. But that's one of the reasons that we need to emphasize, kind of prudent planning and following public health professionals. In some instances, the recommendation of public health officials might be not to travel, and is in fact, don't travel to certain areas, or be cautious of events given the population makeup you would have in that event. But that doesn't mean that we should cancel everything. And so in this regard, we're encouraging businesses not to overreact. Just because what's a prudent decision in one circumstance of travel or one event doesn't mean that that's the prudent decision across the board.
Neil, you live at the intersection of U.S. business and the government. Are there things that you think the government should be doing? It's not. We just had the president sign a bill today, $8.3 billion, to appropriate money to deal with the coronavirus. Are there things that you would want to see from the government you're not seeing yet?
No, the most important thing, and I think the administration deserves credit, and the vice president in particular, they were really stepping up over the last week, is we need constant good information from our medical professionals, giving us their best advice. We understand that the situation may change or evolve, but we need to make decisions based on what the facts are today. And so getting that type of that information is the most important thing. The supplemental that the president just signed that you referenced, that's important because it gives the medical professionals the resources they need to tackle this virus. And so we're taking all the right steps. We just need to be calm and prudent and keep doing that.
One of the pieces of information that I think a lot of people are fastened on is how many people have the virus today in the United States. And it's hard to answer, impossible to answer that question right now because of the testing. And we have had conflicting numbers about the test kits and how many people are being tested, can be tested. Where are we on that from your point of view?
Well, you're right. We don't know how many people are infected. And in fact, we have to think responsibly about how that's going to end up happening, right? As we administer more tests, we are almost certainly going to find out that there are more people who have been infected. That doesn't mean that somehow the virus is exploding and growing. It just means we have better information. We saw the same thing in China, right? The more you begin to test, the more you find out. For most individuals, the medical professionals tell us that it has a very mild reaction. In some instances, people don't even know that they have the coronavirus. So we are going to see those numbers go up. I think we have to set the right benchmarks. We should have every expectation that the number of people infected will go up. That should not be a cause for panic.
Here's a question you may or may not be able to answer, but as I say, you are in contact with a lot of U.S. businesses daily. Are they as nervous as some of us in the media sometimes make it out? I mean, how much of this is a media phenomenon, and how much of this is really, or if you talk to businesses across the country, they're saying we're really pretty nervous. We're not sure what's going to happen. We're nervous about it.
So I hate to say it, but I think it's in many respects a media phenomenon.
Well, I led you there.
And no, it's true. I mean, so we talk to businesses all the time, small businesses in particular, and there's new survey data out just on this. I think from Paychecks out this week. They're monitoring, they're paying attention, they're being prudent, but they're not panicking. They're not changing their business operations. We hear the same thing from large businesses as well. It's easy to report the stories about the WEF canceling a conference or the decline in travel. I'll tell you something that happened yesterday that it hasn't been reported as much. Right. The U.S. Chamber hosted our annual aviation summit. Yep. We had 900 people, record attendance.
There you go.
Things are still happening and going on.
Probably more people than were going to Riyadh, actually. Okay, many thanks to Neil Bradley of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Coming up here, it's not just U.S. companies being hit with the uncertainty surrounding the coronavirus. We talk with Jeannie Zaino of Iona College about what it could mean for voters going to the polls in an election year. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
A pack needs someone to follow.
It's got to be important for somebody to have a breakout moment.
Don't look now, but they're behind you.
Imports declined 2.8%.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
Sources tell us that agreement is expected to include commitments on U.S. intellectual property.
With Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager.
Could we see that play into the results and the forward guidance?
Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Okay, kids, Dad's gonna teach you how to dance. First, spread your feet apart. Then, pump your knee, nod your head, shake your hips, and bite your lip ever so slightly. Now, with one hand in the air, point at people with the other hand. I call that the rock star.
Dance like a dad. It's a great way to make a moment with your kids.
Now, make a face like it just smells something bad.
Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
You could find a $5, a $10, a $20, or even a crisp $50 inside the Sun on Sunday. That's right, cash. Yes, real banknotes inside the paper. We're giving away a wallet-busting amount of cash this weekend only in the Sun on Sunday. It pays to read The Sun. T's and C's apply.
The famous five were discussing their next adventure to Oxford. Let's visit Christ Church Tower, said Dick. The Bodleian Library, added Julian. Magdalen
bridge, cried Anne. Dick jumped up. We'd better leave now. Oxford is so far away. Relax, said George. It's faster than you think by train. Anyway, we can't go yet. You're still in your pyjamas. London to Oxford in as little as 44 minutes. So adventures are closer than you think. Great Western Railway. Adventures start here. Fastest train from Paddington to Oxford. Terms and conditions apply.
They don't chant your name when you give blood, or sing songs about you. But patients and their families will remember you forever. Because your blood can change their lives. We need more blood donors in Tooting, the West End and Edgware. Bleed for London. Join us today at blood.co.uk.
At Asda, with our great range of beers and cider, it looks like you're hosting. Get 2 packs for just £18 or just £10 each. Like 12 bottles of Corona or 10 cans of Copperberg Cherry. Cracking brands, refreshing prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money. Live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Offer ends 18th of March. 330 millilitres each. Drink aware.
The Big B&Q 20% off bathroom event is now on. We've huge savings on a range of toilets, basins, baths and furniture. So you can get a great deal on the style that suits you. But hurry, 20% off ends Monday. You can do it when you B&Q it. Offer ends 9th of March. Subject to availability. See DIY.com.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, hook, into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks plunging again. Treasury yields sinking. Credit markets suffering the worst day in a decade. Fears mounting that the government response to the spreading coronavirus will not prevent an economic slump. We've got the S&P down 72, a drop of 2.4%. The Dow down 462 points, down 1.8%. Nasdaq down 241. That is a drop of 2.8%. 10-year yield 0.74%. Gold down 0.2%, 16.68 the ounce. Crude, a massive story today. We've got West Texas Intermediate crude plunging 8.3%. No agreement out of Vienna. West Texas Intermediate now at 42.11 a barrel of Brent. 46.14 Brent. The global benchmark is plunging by 7.7%. Recapping, bottom line, steep losses for the U.S. equity market again. S&P down 71. What a week. A drop now of 2.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. From the Interactive Broker Studio, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. We're in the middle of an election year, as well as a coronavirus epidemic, and the two may become intertwined in all sorts of ways. Here to help us sort it all out is Bloomberg Politics contributor Jeannie Zaino. She's professor of political science at Iona College and senior advisor to Applied Techonomics. So, Jeannie, great to have you with us. So it may be early going, but is there an intersection between these two events?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, on the one hand, there is the question, does this decrease turnout at the polls? We haven't seen anything along those lines
we didn't
yet.
see it on Tuesday, do you think? No.
Yeah, we watched carefully on Tuesday. Actually, in many places, turnout was up, so it didn't seem to have an impact. But yet, as the number of cases increases, we don't know what's going to happen by next Tuesday or the following sets of primaries and caucuses. So it could have that impact because, of course, you're asking people to go to a public place, to engage. If it's a caucus, it's a lot more engagement. Of course, a primary, you go vote. But so it could have that impact. I also think it's going to shape the race in other ways. I do think it makes people think about what is the role of a president? What is their responsibility? And particularly for Donald Donald Trump, the economy has been his calling card. Even people who don't like the rhetoric and don't like some of the style have said they will hold their nose and vote for Donald Trump because of the markets and how strong they have been. And while there's still really strong signs in the economy, something like this can really impact what people think, particularly moderates, independents going to the polls, if it, continues into the fall.
We also, I think, can have this discussion more easily today than we could a week ago because it's a much more specific set of questions. We don't have as many candidates. We've got two candidates really on the Democratic side and one on the Republican. And you can talk about things like issues like healthcare, for example, across three people in a way that's very hard across 10 people.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that we're down to a two-man race on the Democratic side and obviously the president, it's much easier to talk about. And, healthcare is still the number one issue on most voters' minds as they head to a polls. And nothing gets people thinking about healthcare than a scare like this, which has impacted not just, one region of the country, but across the country increasingly, and of course around the world, in almost every sector, whether it's education, airlines, entertainment, travel, all of these things, it's impacting people where they live. And it does, raise these questions about what should the future of healthcare in this country be and what responsibility does the president have. And of course, we've just seen the Supreme Court take a case on the Affordable Care Act that they'll decide, or hear in October. It probably won't get decided until the following year.
That's the tricky part, because you'll have the argument with the administration really arguing against the Affordable Care Act, that Obamacare, just shortly, I think, before the election, but they won't have a decision. So I wonder if that will create potentially an issue for whoever the Democrat is.
Yeah, I think it's going to create a lot of issues. I think it's going to create questions for the president in terms of, if you don't like the Affordable Care Act, but what are you going to replace it with? I think it creates problems for Bernie Sanders as people think about, is now the time to take away my private health insurance? So many millions of Americans who depend on that and go to a government-run system. So the real winner out of this may be a Joe Biden who is saying, keep what we have and think about fixing it or making it better, but don't talk about taking it away. And if you're going to talk about replacing it, tell us what you're going to replace it with.
And that looks forward to November, but we have several primaries coming up this next Tuesday, including in my home state of Michigan, where that private health insurance could be a big issue because you've got a lot of union workers, a lot of UAW workers who fought hard to get that fairly robust private health care insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's quite a time to be talking about taking that away. And as much as Bernie Sanders, we know, is depending on Michigan to really boost his potential to keep going in this race, you talk about taking something away. For many union members, this is really the last vestige of what they have. They fought long and hard for this health insurance. The idea that they're going to turn this over to the government is something that's not going to sit well. And I think it's something that in 2016, he won big in Michigan, but we are in a different, really a different time right now in 2020 to think about pulling that back. I think is going to be a bridge too far for many of these union workers.
As a political scientist and a former pollster, if I can say that, what do you make of Bernie Sanders' strategy right now? Now that he's running against Joe Biden, because it doesn't seem like he's trying to reach out to almost anybody. He feels like he's sort of doubling down on his base. He's sort of angry at the Democratic Party.
He is, and he's really fighting an uphill battle. It's really difficult to win the Democratic primary without African Americans. That's just a fact. And so as he has decided not, for instance, to go to Jackson, Mississippi and talk about issues of race and head to Michigan instead, he is putting all his eggs in that Midwestern basket where he thinks he's got a good chance. But the Democrats in the South, Republicans, African Americans rather, in the South, they're a key constituency. You're hard pressed to do well in this primary without their support. So I think it's long been a questionable strategy, and it really says that he has not been able to boost his chances with that really important group since 2016.
And Joe Biden, the former vice president, picked up quite a few endorsements from Michigan over the last 24, 36 hours, actually. The governor, you have Alyssa Slotkin, you have a lot of Democrats, establishment Democrats in Michigan who are now endorsing Joe Biden.
Yeah, and the former governor, and the list is long. I think that's something, the endorsements we've seen have helped Joe Biden. I think there's also a way in which it hurts him, and people say this is just the establishment trying to, push Bernie Sanders. Particularly Bernie Sanders supporters are really frustrated with what they see as a concerted effort by the establishment in Washington, D.C. to do what they think they did in 2016 2016, which is to rob him of this victory. But I do think that's going to be important for Joe Biden. And I think we're going to see, we've already seen the rhetoric by Bernie Sanders change. He is now going full throttle against Joe Biden for things like the Iraq War. And it's questionable whether that's still an issue on people's minds in the way it was when it was used against Hillary Clinton in 2008.
Yeah, we forget how long ago it was now, the Iraq War.
It was a long time ago.
Many thanks to Bloomberg political contributor Jeannie Zaino. Coming up, Republican senators say they're pressing ahead with an investigation of Vice President Biden's son and his role in the Ukraine. We talk with Robert Mintz of McCarter and English. That is coming up next on Balance of Power, and we are on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are coming back from much deeper losses, but we're still in the red. The Dow is down 465 points, S&P dropping 74, the Nasdaq falling 238 points. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 7% to $42.33 a barrel. Investor confidence has been shaken today as cases of the virus continue to multiply despite efforts to contain the outbreak. The number of coronavirus infections has now risen above 100,000 as more infections are now confirmed in the U.S., Germany, and South Korea. All of that is offsetting the country's biggest payroll gain in almost 2 years. Some 273,000 jobs were added last month. The jobless rate fell to 3.5%, and average hourly earnings inched higher. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Matt Letizia, what did you make of that performance today?
Well, it really was a game of two halves, to be honest, Jeff. Leicester came out in the first half really...
Letiz?
What's up, Jeff?
Run for it!
What the...
Move over, football. Cheltenham coming through. And Sky Bet are on the charge. With money back as actual cash, up to £10 if you lose on the first race of the festival. Sky Bet. That's betting better. Applies to first bet on first race at Cheltenham on losing singles and win part of each way singles only. Money back as cash, free bet stakes excluded, eligibility restrictions, T's and C's apply. 18 plus, begambleaware.org.
This ad is made from 100% recycled commercials. Just like Smart Water's
all new
bottles are made from
100% recycled
plastic.
What's that number again?
100%. Every Smart Water bottle is made using recycled plastic, and because it's still
100%
recyclable, the plastic will be used again
and again.
Smart Water, now in a 100% recycled plastic bottle. Label and cap 100% recyclable, but not made from recycled plastic. Yet. We're working on it.
At Asda, with our great range of beers and cider, it looks like you're hosting. Get 2 packs for just £18 or just £10 each. Like 12 bottles of Corona or 10 cans of Copperberg Cherry. Cracking brands, refreshing prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money. Live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Offer ends 18th of March. 330 millilitres each. Drink aware.
From barbers to dog groomers,
At Starling Bank, we'll help you keep your business off the ground. With no monthly fees to weigh you down. Your business is ready for takeoff. Starling Bank. Helping business fly.
Stace, are you ready yet? Have you seen the Butlins lineup? I was born ready. We're going big tonight. Raxu then Brainiac live.
Those experiments will blow the boys' socks off.
They're wearing flip-flops, Joe, not socks.
Oh, dance shoes tomorrow, though, for the Diversity Dance Academy. I am going to throw some shapes.
Are you sure about that?
Well, it's a lot easier when you're not on ice.
Well, if anyone could teach you to dance, it's going to be Diversity. Come on, we're going to be late.
For an exciting family break to Butlins this Easter, book online now. Are you ready to Butlins?
Think you've seen a fridge freezer before? Just look at this LG InstaView door-in-door. Knock twice on the fridge door and you can see what's inside without even opening it. How cool is that? All LG fridge freezers keep everything fresher for longer with innovative cooling. More taste, less waste. And with all LG appliances, you can save up to £100 when you trade in your old one. Heroes of the home at Curry's PC World. Full terms at currys.co.uk.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, the Senate's continuing investigation into Ukraine. We're joined by my colleague June Grasso to talk about possible legal exposure for Hunter Biden, the former vice president's son. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellet.
Right, I thank you very much, David Weston. As you know, lots going on this Friday. What a week it has been. Right now, we have got Treasury yields plummeting to record lows as concern about the global economic and financial impact of the coronavirus spurs demand for havens, while questions swirl about liquidity in the world's biggest debt market. We've got the 10-year yielding 0.76%. S&P 500 index down now by 68 points. That is a drop of just about 2.3%. The Dow tumbling 423 points. It is down now by 1.6%. NASDAQ down 227 points. That is a drop of 2%. Bottom line, a lot of recovery for equities. At the worst level of the day, the Dow had been down 894 points, down 3.4%. Right now, looking at a drop of 1.65%. Stocks plunged. Treasury yields sank. Credit markets suffered the worst day in a decade, with fears mounting that the government response to the spreading coronavirus will not prevent an economic slump. We did, however, get the jobs report today, and February employment suggests America's labor market is on firm footing before the coronavirus intensified. With that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
It's a big gain. 273,000 new jobs in February, topping Wall Street forecasts by almost 100,000. The biggest gain since May 2018. January job growth was revised higher as well, and the unemployment rate tied a half-century low, 3.5%. The road ahead is fraught with risk, though, as the coronavirus curbs business activity. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
Speaking of which, San Francisco-based apparel retailer Gap Inc. has closed its New York City offices after a worker tested positive for the coronavirus. The viral outbreak, which originated in China, is increasingly disrupting daily life in major American cities as the number of cases rise. And not just in the U.S., Facebook today closed its London offices until Monday for deep cleaning after a Singapore-based employee who previously visited their London bureau tested positive for the coronavirus. Gold, little change now, flat, $16.72 the ounce. Crude, a major story today. No agreement in Vienna. West Texas Intermediate crude plunging 8.1%, $42.16 a barrel. Brent, 7.8% lower now, $46.10 for a barrel of Brent crude. Recapping, we've got the 10-year, 0.75%. S&P down 72, a drop there of 2.4%. Busy day indeed. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's the Bloomberg Business Business Flash, but Balance of Power continues, the Friday edition. Here he is, your host, David Weston.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. Ron Johnson, the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, says he's going to press ahead with an investigation into former Vice President Biden's son, Hunter, and his role in the Ukrainian energy company Burisma. To take us through the law involved, we welcome now my colleague June Grasso and Robert Mintz. He's head of the White Collar Criminal Investigations Practice at McCarter and English. So, Bob, welcome back. It's great to have you here. In introducing June Grasso, I said she's going to talk about the possible legal exposure for Hunter Biden. Is there any? I mean, as I said that, I thought, well, is this law or is this politics?
Well, it's really a combination of both. I think what we're seeing here is the Senate Homeland Security Committee picking up on some of the charges that President Trump had made months ago that it ended up getting intertwined into the impeachment process. And they're really looking at Hunter Biden's position on the board of Burisma, which was a Ukrainian oil and gas company that had a history of corruption. And the question is whether or not he was trading on his father's position. Vice President Biden at the time was overseeing United States policy towards Ukraine. There's criticism that the younger Mr. Biden had no experience on energy issues and was paid a large salary for this position on the board. But while all that may be unseemly, there's a difference between trying to trade on those contacts and actually doing something illegal, trying to use his name to influence or gain access to the Obama administration. But that's what Republicans want to look at, and that's why they want to issue these subpoenas.
Well, exactly. I mean, if getting a job you shouldn't have gotten because of your last name was a crime, there'd probably be quite a few people in jail that aren't in jail right now.
Name Trump.
But in order, well, yeah, I won't go there. But if it is in fact the case, and I haven't heard anyone deny it, that the vice president himself didn't have anything to do with this, didn't even know about it. In fact, would there be anything illegal in his son having this job?
I don't think there'd be anything illegal. I think it would be unseemly, and
yes.
They've already acknowledged that. The question would be whether or not there was any type of illegal trading on that position, giving them access that they otherwise might not have in order to line the younger Mr. Biden's pockets. There doesn't seem to be any evidence of that, and this has been looked at before, but that's what Republicans want to look at again, and that's why they want to issue these subpoenas. It seems at this point that they are going to try to keep this lower key in the sense that the chairman of the committee, Ron Johnson, has said that these hearings will be done privately, will not be in a public forum, but that's where things stand right now. We'll have to see where that goes.
Bob, I've heard some calls on House committees to start investigating the Trump children. Now, that would really open up a can of worms.
Yeah, it really should, and it really goes to the question that Mitt Romney has raised in regards to all of these investigations. And basically, he has said that these investigations, the one into Burisma and the allegations about possibly starting investigations into the president's sons, really should be run, if they should be run at all, by an independent law enforcement agency such as the FBI. That these are not the kind of things that really should be done by House or Senate committees because they become so political, particularly if they conduct any portion of these investigations in a public forum. And he's got a point there that these things probably should be left to law enforcement agencies rather than House or Senate committees, which are really supposed to be using these committees to have oversight over the executive branch or to investigate something that may ultimately lead to some kind of legislative change here. But unfortunately, they're being used in ways that are arguably more political than they are legislative, and that's the time that we live in now.
Well, I wonder when you reach public fatigue on this issue, because I feel personal fatigue about this issue. I can't believe we're discussing it again. So let's change the topic a little bit. A federal judge in Washington actually questioned Attorney General William Barr's credibility and says he's going to conduct an independent review of the Mueller report. Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, that's an interesting issue here. Judge Walton, who actually is an appointee of George W. Bush, so he was appointed by a Republican president, issued, in an opinion, a rather scathing commentary on William Barr, the Attorney General, and his handling, as you said, of the Mueller report. It comes up in the context of a Freedom of Information Act request, where an outside party is seeking the full unredacted Mueller report. And what happens in the course of these things is that the Department of Justice has submitted to the judge proposed redactions to the report. In other words, the entire report would not be released as a result of this Freedom of Information Act request. There'd be certain parts that would be redacted out for national security and other reasons. What the judge has said here is that he is uncomfortable relying on the Department of Justice's recommendations without seeing what's behind the redactions. In other words, he wants to look at the full report and decide for himself whether the information that is attempting to be withheld by the Department of Justice is valid or not.
How unusual is this? I don't know. I haven't done that many FOIA cases. You may have done a lot more than I have, but how unusual is it? Because if there have been redactions, often people will say, well, how do I know that there's a right to redactions? And it's not unusual, I know, for a court, if there are redactions of some sort in some document, to say, I'd like to see it for myself.
It's pretty unusual for the judge to want to go through that level of detail, him or herself. I mean, this is a 300-and-something page report, and judges, particularly federal judges, are very busy people. And the idea that you're going to go through line by line and look at each of these redactions to decide for yourself whether or not they are valid is something that's pretty unusual. And it's done in the context of an opinion in which the judge called out the Attorney General and used terms like lack of candor. He said that the Attorney General distorted and gave a misleading account of the findings in the Mueller report. So it really has a larger backdrop here.
Yeah, fair point. Federal district court judges don't typically say, I don't believe the Attorney General. Okay, thanks very much now to my colleague June Grasso and to Robert Mintz of McCarter and English. Coming up, it's clear investors are afraid, but what exactly are they afraid of? We talk with John Authors, who's taken a look for us. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson